Yeah, a really interesting question about the nature of atheism. It has been something that's been thought about a very great deal in the science and religion field lately. And some of the most influential opinions on this suggest that atheism is a form of religious belief in its own right, insofar as it's very, very confident that religious believers are wrong, and that science can tell us that there is no God, God doesn't exist, or so doesn't have any influence on the world. So straight away that's suggesting, that confidence is starting to sound a little bit like the religious faith of a believer. And so you get people who say, well, the very hard-line atheists display all of the kinds of tendencies that Christian fundamentalists do. It's another form of fundamentalist belief. I'm not sure if that's really true, but certainly I can see the parallels here. But one of the interesting points that's been made about historians of atheism is that the way that it's arisen since around the 18th century or so is that the forms of atheism usually react to forms of theism. In other words, atheism never exists just purely in a vacuum. It always has to respond to something. It's a rejection of a form of theism. Agnosticism, in a way, is more neutral. But there are, of course, agnostics in our world, but I think that those who are more vocal about it tend to say they're atheists, and I believe they're probably reacting against something. So it is a sign that there are beliefs, metaphysical beliefs, almost religious beliefs going on. So what I'm trying to say here is that my personal opinion is, yes, atheism is a form of religious belief in its own right, although that does sound paradoxical. Yes, I'm often asked this question, how can I be a physicist and a Christian? Surely there's conflict here. And I've been asked this so many times. I used to say there's no conflict between my identity as a scientist and my religious belief. I now think there probably is a bit more. Now that I teach the subject of science and religion, I think that it's legitimate to say there is degrees of conflict. I don't feel it personally, though. I think my own identity is, when I'm doing my scientific work, I'm trying to understand the way that nature works, and as I said in a previous answer, we have this set of toolkits. I have a physics toolkit that I use, which has been developed and refined over generations by previous physicists. It works very, very well. But when you start asking questions that go beyond physics, like where does the toolkit come from? Why are we confident that this part of our toolkit works and we know that bit doesn't? What's behind all this? You very quickly start asking questions about things like where do the laws of nature come from? Why do we think that our intelligence and rationality is good enough, is sufficient to investigate and ask these kinds of questions? The universe could be different. What's behind all this? You start asking questions that science can't answer, metaphysical questions or theological questions. And for me, this is where my identity as a Christian comes in, because it's very easy for me to then fall back on my Christian belief in a God who created the world and I can say, the laws of nature were made by God, part of God's creation. God gave us this toolkit, gave us the laws of physics such that we can learn about God's creation and be amazed by it and praise God as a result. So I've always found that there isn't this conflict in myself simply because I have a Christian belief in the laws of nature and so on. But I'm fully aware that the sciences do raise issues that appear to conflict. And particularly those who would like to find evidence of God in creation, that they could put their finger on and say, yes, that is God. This is, of course, where intelligent design comes in. This is one of the areas which is constantly being debated. And like I said, I don't have that conflict in my own belief, but plenty of people do have that. So I think this is partly a personal thing. But like I said, in the science and religion world, there are flashpoints, if you like, areas of conflict. And the very fact that we talk about science and religion as two separate and distinct entities now, more or less suggests there's going to be areas where they conflict with each other.